Sandy, or Alex G, is an indie folk Americana, lo-fi indie singer-songwriter who has burst onto the scene over the past couple of years with albums such as Rocket that have really hit wider audiences. He's been on the scene for a while, but it seems as though recently he's gotten a much bigger fan base. And leading up to House of Sugar, it seemed as though this was going to be his biggest to date, and so far it has been his most celebrated by far as well. Like, this is the one album I think people have really latched onto in comparison to his previous work. Really cool to see how you can just essentially be a nobody and then make your way up through just putting out music that people like, and eventually you'll make it. We've seen it time and time again, especially this decade, with people in the indie scene who have just burst their way up to the top. You see it with bands like Parquet Courts, Car Seat Headrest. Seen it with Mitski as well. Way more examples, but you know, they're just a few that you will definitely have heard of if you're a music fan. I'm kind of just avoiding the inevitable here by going on this random spiel to start off the video because yeah, I'm just not liking this. Look, I don't do this on purpose. I don't intentionally dislike albums that get hype. You saw it the other day, I was raving about JPEG Mafia, but sometimes there are just albums that I just do not get, and almost everyone, so many of my friends, are loving this album and I'm just not seeing it. To start with, my main issue with Alex G is just how lacking in expression he is as a vocalist. Like, his voice just completely breezes by. Like, I played this album a few times, just going on walks and stuff like that. Before I knew it, the album was done, and I couldn't even recall a single moment of the album. And I'm really not exaggerating either. It really did just breeze by without leaving any sort of impact. And it is a short album too, it's like 37 minutes-ish, so it really just did feel like I was getting nothing from it. Most of the time, that's really not a thing for me. I don't usually have to just sit down and do nothing else but to listen to an album for me to actually be able to pick up my phone, record myself talking about it. That's rarely a thing, but this album did that to me. It really doesn't help that musically this album matches Alex as a vocalist too. It's just very much passable. It is just the definition of passable. It's nice on the ears. There are some lovely instrumentals, some nice guitar playing throughout here, across the whole album, but generally it really is just background noise. Until there are a few moments where it breaks beyond that and actually just gets a bit irritating or a bit questionable to me. Like tracks like Project 2, I just do not see what this track is attempting to do. Sure, it's just a mini interlude type thing, but I just find it goes all over the place and just sounds random as hell. Nia is another track as well to me that feels completely jumbled. It's got this like psychedelic quality to it, but the repetition of the you thing that he does on this track just really irritates me. So when it's not being just nondescript indie folk music, it's being irritating. I mean, a track like Bad Man, where he's putting on this weird country inflection on his voice, I just think he sounds awful doing that. And you guys always moan about country music and how boring it is, and yet you don't have a problem with Alex G doing it. Come on. I'm a bad man. Now, there certainly are some positives to take away. I'm not just gonna shit on this album the whole way through, because I don't think the album on a whole is bad. I think the track Hope is a pretty solid indie folk tune. It's pretty lovely on the ears. Pretty straightforward as is. I mean, it's not really attempting to break any ground, but I suppose it doesn't really need to. It's a good enough track on its own to warrant its placing on this album. The standouts for me are definitely In My Arms and Gretel, though. Gretel being the lead single prior to this album's release. Definitely one of the more interesting moments musically on the album. I think the vocals here actually sound very euphoric at some points. I just really like the moment where the instrumental really slows down and comes to a halt, and he's just like, I don't want to go back. That's just a point on the album for me where I was like, okay, we're getting it now. We're getting Alex G coming through. This is where his vocals are gonna break through and shine. But as I've mentioned already throughout the album, we didn't really get that for the rest of it, unfortunately. And even with this track, actually, I just feel like the second half is building to something and it ends up leading nowhere. I can picture this song in my head where it could go, and I just get a bit disappointed that it kind of just fizzles out a little bit. I just feel like this track could have really hit some kind of climax where it could have just extended out to like 6 or 7 minutes, where he keeps repeating that refrain of the I don't wanna go back. Like, I feel like he could have like belted out his vocals. I could just see where this song was going, and it just never goes there. It's still decent as is, but I just saw something in the song that I just don't feel like we ended up getting. And I mentioned In My Arms as well as being another highlight on the album, where I just really like the guitar melody on this one. It's just really straightforward, but it is just really impactful. I think his somber vocals really match this track too. Another moment on the album, a rare one, where I am liking his vocal performance. But that's really just as far as I can go. I struggle with so many of these tracks. I think that intro track is really repetitive and annoying. I just feel like it just drones on way too long. Just runs out of steam way too quickly. It doesn't strike a chord with me at all, but I could see a track like this hitting someone in a different way that it hit me. I mean, clearly there are people out there that are loving this way more than I am, so clearly it must be striking a chord somewhere. But even lyrically, I'm just struggling with this album too. Like, I'm seeing some of these tracks that just don't really have a great deal of meat in the lyrics. Some of these songs are very short, so there's not really much to latch onto there anyway. And I just thought there would be something that I'd gain, but I'm just not getting anything. I mean, Cow has some of the worst lyrics on the album for me. That track was not good. The whole big old cow, draw me out, you lie on the ground, kiss on the mouth thing was just really childish to me. And there were some other childish moments on this album too, especially with the vocals. I believe there are guest vocalists coming through on tracks like Southern Sky and Taking, but they could be pitched vocals, I'm not entirely sure. But either way, I just wasn't feeling them at all. They sound really sappy and really like make-believe in a weird way. I just couldn't really get connecting to them. And yeah, that's essentially this whole review summed up. I just couldn't connect to really anything on this album aside from those rare moments that did work. The album closes on a live song named Sugar House. It felt a bit random to end the album this way, I'm not going to lie. I actually had to check to see if it was a bonus track, which then would have made sense, but no, the album does close off with this song, and I just felt it was a bit weird. For me, the perfect way to close it out was actually In My Arms, but it's okay that he ended the album with a live song. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the song itself just didn't work for me. As soon as I heard that cheesy sax come through, I was ready to hit the stop button. That was just not working for me at all, honestly. But it was a moment that made me realize how versatile Alex G actually is. I mean, I've mentioned he's an indie folk singer across this album, and there are many indie folk type tunes on this thing, but there are other styles of music as well, which I think might be why this album is resonating with people. It's not just a one-note album. You couldn't really say that. It is attempting many things throughout. Just for me, it's not really always working. I just think if he expressed more in his voice, I really would connect to it a lot more. But a lot of indie folk singer-songwriters these days really have this issue for me, and that's kind of where my main problem lies. So yeah, I'm gonna go 5 out of 10. I know this probably won't go down too well. Hopefully you can hear me out and understand what I'm saying. Thank you for watching my review. Hopefully you got something out of my review. If you like the album, let me know in the comments what you think. Have a good day. Goodbye. Subscribe. Goodbye.